Hi, welcome to Candela. I'm Kavita. In this lecture, we shall discuss capital punishment in India. During recent times, we are witnessing various heinous crimes like mass murder, rape, killing, child abuse, terrorist activities, mass killings, etc. Whenever such a heinous crime happens, the media, people, society, NGOs, all of them come together and raise a huge cry demanding justice for the victim's family. We can even witness several debates which happen. Some people go on to the extent of deciding what should be the punishment that should be given to these culprits. Some people suggest that they must be hanged. Some people say they must be hanged in public. Some people even say they must be given capital punishment, life sentence, and some people even advocate extrajudicial killing, or what we call it as encounter. We call ourselves a civilized state. Can a civilized state afford to punish its own citizens in such a brutal way? However, on the other hand, we have various civil society organizations which argue against capital punishment. They say it is violation of the human rights, that is, the capital punishment, giving a person death sentence or killing him, is violating the basic human right of a person. And so the Amnesty International in 2008 advised the nations for abolishment of death punishment or capital punishment, or it said at least reduce its numbers. So now in this lecture we shall discuss what is capital punishment, is there a need for capital punishment, what are the constitutional provisions related to it, and what are the various judgments pronounced by the High Court and Supreme Court which have influenced this. We should also discuss about the recent executions which have happened, and we should also discuss about the encounter killings, and we should also discuss about the issue of hanging in public. First we shall discuss what is capital punishment. The phrase capital punishment comes from the Latin word for the head. Capital punishment is the practice of executing someone as a punishment for a specific crime after a proper legal trial. That is, capital punishment is the practice of executing someone as a punishment for a specific crime after a proper legal trial. That is, whenever you are going to punish a person, it must be through a proper legal trial only, and the punishment can be given only by the state. So it can be used by the state. So when a non-state organization speaks of having executed a person, they have actually committed a murder. So execution cannot be done by an individual or a group of people. A punishment can be awarded only by the state, and only when such an execution happens after it has been awarded by the state, we can call it as a capital punishment. Whereas if an individual or a group of people do it, we cannot call it as execution. It is called as a murder. Capital punishment is given usually for various serious crimes only, like rape, murder, and so on. However, in some countries, even for petty punishment, even for petty crimes like say fraud, adultery, and even a few rare cases also, capital punishment is awarded. Similarly, capital punishment is used in many countries around the world. However, it has been abolished in few countries also. In the last decade, there is a huge increase in the number of executions. So, isn't this a cause of concern? Where are we heading towards? Before we discuss this, we shall understand what is the need for capital punishment. Need for capital punishment. So, why is a punishment given? Every weapon has its own utility in warfare. Similarly, every form of punishment has its own utility in establishing a fair state. That is, the need is to bring about social control. So, a punishment is given for two reasons. First one, it is to punish the guilty, that is, it is to punish the person who has committed the crime or offense. Second one is to create fear, thereby to prevent the reoccurrence of the crime. That is, once a person, whoever commits a crime, is given a punishment, it will create fear in the other people, so they will hesitate to commit such a crime. So these are the two reasons. The first one is to punish the guilty, and the second one is to create fear in other people so they do not attempt such a crime. So all and only guilty people deserve to be punished. This is one of the reason. So the guilty people deserve to be punished in proportion to the severity of the crime. That is, if they do a petty crime or a simple like a theft or so on, they will be given a lenient punishment. Whereas if they conduct a very serious crime like a murder, then the punishment will also be severe. So the punishment will be in proportion to the severity of the crime conducted by the person. Then by executing the convicted murderers, we will be deterring the would-be murderers from killing people. That is, once if you give a punishment to a person who has committed a crime, the other people will be hesitating to create such a crime. So the primary purpose of punishment is to bring about social control and to establish a fair state. Now we shall discuss what are the constitutional provisions related to this. First is Article 21, protection of life and personal liberty. So according to Article 21, no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. I will repeat again. No person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. What does this mean? This means that the state shall protect the life and personal liberty of the individuals. However, state also, according to this provision, state can also make a law to deprive the same. That is, state can make a law according to which the life and personal liberty of an individual can be curtailed. So it is this Article 21 which says that the state is supposed to protect the life and personal liberty of the individuals or the citizens. However, it also gives a right to the state to make laws which will curtail the life and personal liberty of the citizens. Article 20, protection in respect of conviction of offences. Here we have three important points: ex post facto legislation, double jeopardy and self-incriminating evidence. Out of these three, double jeopardy is very important. First one is ex post facto legislation. That is, a person cannot be given a punishment for a crime which he conducted when the law was not in force at the time when he committed the crime. Okay, say I can give you an example of helmet. So earlier driving without a helmet was not an offence, whereas now it is an offence and we are punishable. We are supposed to pay a fine for that. So you cannot take an evidence of a person who was driving sometime long back without a helmet and you cannot punish him now presently, right? So this is what we call it as ex post facto legislation. That is, a person cannot be punished for a crime which he conducted sometime back when the law was not in force. So only if you are committing a crime today, you can be punished according to the law which is in force today only. Okay. The second one is double jeopardy. That is, a person cannot be punished twice for a single offence which he committed. The best example which I can give for this is the convicts of the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. The Rajiv Gandhi assassination case is a very famous one and it happened in 1991. So we all know there were 4 people who were convicted for this. First one is Nalini, Perarivalan, Murugan and Santan. Out of these 4 people, these 3 were awarded death sentence. However, these 3 of them have not been executed so far. Even now they are languishing in the jail. So what exactly happened? Why weren't they executed? We shall discuss this further. So double jeopardy means you cannot punish a person twice for a single offence which he committed. Next one is self-incriminating evidence. No person can be Third one is self-incriminating evidence. No person can be forced to give evidence against his own. That is, you cannot take a person and you cannot force him to give evidence against himself. This is what we mean by self-incriminating evidence. So, under Article 20, it is protection in respect of conviction of offences, under which we have three important points. First one is ex post facto legislation, and second one is double jeopardy, and third one is self-incriminating evidence. Now we shall discuss Article 72. Article 72, the power of the President to grant pardons and to suspend, remit or commute sentences in certain cases. That is, the President, according to Article 72, has the power to pardon or to suspend, remit or commute sentences in certain cases. Similar powers have been extended to the governor under Article 161. That is, the governor has the power to grant pardon and to suspend, remit or commute sentences in certain cases. However, we have to note an important difference here. The President has the power to pardon a death sentence, whereas the governor does not have the power to pardon a death sentence. So, this is the difference between the powers of the President under Article 72 and powers of the governor under Article 61. That is, the governor does not have the power to pardon a death sentence. So, why is this topic capital punishment in news recently? Why is it in news? Recently we witnessed the execution of the convicts of the Nirbhaya rape case. Recently in early of this year in 2020, the 4 convicts of the Nirbhaya murder case were executed. Immediately the next day, the United Nations called all the nations to stop the use of capital punishment or to put a moratorium on it, and that is why it has been in the talk recently. Along with this, we also have many recent executions. Recent executions. In addition to the recent execution of the Nirbhaya case convicts, we also have few more cases like the Ajmal Kasab case. In 2008, he was hanged, he was given death sentence for the Mumbai attack. Then Muhammad Afzal Guru for the 2001 Parliament attack, and then we also have the convicts of the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. When we discuss these death sentence, we have various questions which come to our mind. The questions are like, is the mercy petition a further appeal in the case? Does the President have discretionary power in deciding a mercy petition? What is the procedure that need to be followed? Does the Constitution make any time limit in disposing the mercy petition? This question we got immediately when I told you that the convicts of the Rajiv Gandhi case are still languishing in jail even though they were awarded death sentence. So, immediately we get this question in mind. Similarly, we have questions like, does the convict have any rights in this regard? That is, when he applies for a death punishment, does he have any rights? Then, is the decision on mercy petition subject to judicial review? That is, suppose a person who is convicted for death sentence, he applies for mercy petition and the President may or may not pardon him. So, is that decision subject to judicial review? So, even before we can answer all these questions, let us study a few cases which are associated with this. First one is the Sher Singh versus State of Punjab. In this case, the Supreme Court pronounced that unjustifiable delay in execution of death sentence violates the Article 21 of the Constitution. That is, unjustifiable delay in execution of the death sentence violates the Article 21 of the Constitution. Article 21 of the Constitution gives us life and personal liberty. That is, suppose a person is convicted and he's been given death sentence. After that, if you just keep him waiting for a long time, he is subject to anxiety, that is about his life. So, when will he be hanged? When his life is going to get over? So, in that way, we are giving him more punishment than death actually. So, in this case, that is Sher Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court pronounced that you should not delay the death sentence beyond a certain time. That is, you should not subject him to further punishment by making him wait for death. Now we shall discuss few more cases related to this. That is the Kehar Singh case and the Maruram case. We already discussed the case, that is Sher Singh versus State of Punjab case. Here they say that the court pronounced that unjustifiable delay in execution of the death sentence violates Article 21 of the Constitution. Now we shall go ahead with the other cases, Kehar Singh case and Maruram case. In Kehar Singh case, the following principles were laid down. Here, first one is, the convict seeking relief has no right to insist on oral hearing. That is, the convict cannot demand or insist that he has to be given a oral hearing in front of the president. Second one is, no guideline need to be laid down by the Supreme Court for the exercise of the power. That is, the Supreme Court cannot tell the president whether he should hear the petitioner, whether he should go to the evidence once again in a fresh manner. So, the Supreme Court cannot give any guidelines for the execution of the power of the president. Third one is, the power is to be exercised by the president on the advice of the central government. That is, whatever decision that the president makes is not his sole discretion. It is based on the advice of the central government. Fourth one is, the president can go into the merits of the case and take a different view. That is, after going to the merits of the case, then the president can take a view different from what the judgment that was given by the Supreme Court. Next one is, exercise of the power of the president is not open to judicial review except for the limited extent. Here, these words, except for the limited extent, is very important. So, is the president's clemency petition subject to judicial review? Is it? Yes or no? It is. Here in this case, they say that the exercise of the power by the president is not open to judicial review. They say it is not subject to judicial review except in a limited extent. So, what is this limited extent during which the president's clemency petition is subject to judicial review? So, this limited extent is discussed in this Maruram case. Okay. So, basically the president's clemency petition is not subjected to judicial review. However, there is a exception for a limited extent. So, under what limited extent is it subject to judicial review? This has been discussed in Maruram case. So, in Maruram case, the court says, that the court can interfere only when the presidential decision is wholly irrelevant to the object of Article 72 or is irrational, it is arbitrary, it is discriminatory, or it is malified. That is, here in this case, Maruram case, the court pronounced that suppose the presidential decision is very irrelevant, it is malified, it is irrational and arbitrary, then only in such cases the president's clemency petition can be subjected to judicial review. Okay. So, this except for the limited extent, this limited extent, that is under what conditions the president's clemency is subject to judicial review has been explained here. So, only when a president makes an irrational decision or it is very arbitrary or discriminate or malified, only in such cases the president's clemency can be subject to judicial review. So, what is the extent of judicial review? So, now we said that only under certain exceptions which have been given in the Maruram case, that is when it is irrational, where it is discriminatory, when it is malified, the president's decision can be subject to judicial review. So, how can it be done? To what extent can the judicial review be done? So, what is the extent of judicial review? So, when the court finds that the decision made by the president is arbitrary, it is irrelevant, or it is irrational, then the court can ask the president, have you gone through all the relevant materials before arriving at this decision? If the president says, yes, I have gone through all the relevant materials and then only I have arrived at this decision, then the court cannot question the president any further. With this, the judicial review of the court will end here. Okay. So, what is the extent of judicial review? That is, when the court feels that the president has made a irrational decision, then it can ask the president whether he has gone through all the relevant materials pertaining to this case before arriving at the decision which he has arrived at. So, if the president says that he has gone through all the relevant material and then only he has arrived at this decision, then the subject of the judicial review will end here. The court cannot question the president any further. Now, let's get back to the list of questions which we made in the beginning and try to answer them one by one. First one, is the mercy petition a further appeal in the case? No. A mercy petition is just a pleading. That is, the convict is pleading the president for mercy to pardon him for the offence which he committed. So, it is not a further appeal in the case. Does the president have discretionary power in deciding a mercy petition? No. The decision which the president makes is based on the advice of the central government. So, it is not the sole discretionary power of the president. What is the procedure that need to be followed? The Supreme Court does not lay down any procedure that has to be followed by the president when he is considering a mercy petition. Does the Constitution make any time limit? Does the Constitution make any time limit in disposing the mercy petition? No, the Constitution does not lay down any time period during which the president should make a decision. Say the president can accept the mercy petition and keep it pending on his table for any amount of time. Even several presidents can come and take over that position. Even after that, it can still be kept pending. A very good example for this is the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. In the beginning, I told you that there were 4 convicts, out of which 3 were given death sentence. So, what happened? These 3 people, that is Perarivalan, Murugan and Santhan, they were subjected to death sentence and they were languishing in the jail for more than 20 years. Even after this amount of time, their mercy petition was not decided upon. That is, the mercy petition which they gave to the president was kept on his table and it was kept pending for an unlimited amount of time, during which they even finished more than 20 years. So, now what happened in February 2014 was the Supreme Court commuted the death sentence to life term. Okay, so why did the Supreme Court do this? Because already by then they had spent nearly 20 years. So, now if they are executed, that is, if they are given death sentence and if they are executed, it will amount to double jeopardy. That is, already they have spent 20 years. That is, one life term imprisonment has been done already, and then again if you execute them, that is, if you hang them, they will be given 2 punishments for a single crime which they committed. This amounts to double jeopardy. That is why they were not executed. Okay. So, the Supreme Court commuted the death sentence to life term on the ground that the mercy petition before the president had not been decided for a very long time and it was still kept pending, because the president did not decide on the mercy petition given by these people and it was kept pending for a very long time. These people were, these convicts were allowed to languish in the jail for a very long period, and now they cannot be executed, because if we execute them now, we will be giving them 2 punishments. Already they have spent 20 years of their life in jail. Again you will be giving them death punishment. So this will amount to double jeopardy. So, does the Constitution make any time limit in disposing the mercy petition? No, the Constitution does not give any time limits to the president to decide on a mercy petition. Does the convict have any rights in this regard? The convict is pleading for mercy over here. Okay, he is pleading the mercy of the president for the offence which he has committed. So, he does not have any rights in this regard. Is the decision on mercy petition subject to judicial review? The decision on the mercy petition made by the president is subjected to very limited judicial review. We already discussed this in the Maruram case. That is, if the court feels that the decision which is made by the president is irrational, then it can question the president whether he has gone through all the relevant materials before arriving at that decision. If the president still says that he has gone through all the relevant material and then only he has arrived at that decision, then the judicial review of the court ends here. It cannot question the president any further. We also have one more question in mind. Is the presidential clemency an encroachment of the judicial powers? That is, the president is making a decision, and then is presidential clemency an encroachment on the judicial powers? The object of conferring this judicial power on the executive is to correct the possible human errors, for no human system of judicial administration can be free of imperfections. Okay. So, judicial system is again composed of humans, and humans are subject to imperfections. So, there might be chances that in some case there might be an error due to which a wrong person might get punished. So, in order to give scope for corrections, the judicial power has been given to the executive in the form of mercy petition. Now, we shall discuss public hanging of the convicts. Now, we shall discuss public hanging of the convicts. Public hanging. Is it possible to publicly hang a convict in our country? No. Earlier, the High Court of Rajasthan had ordered public hanging for a person. However, the Supreme Court in this case of Attorney General of India versus Lakma Devi passed an order setting aside the judgment of the Rajasthan High Court. It said public hanging is violative of Article 21. That is, Article 21 mandates the observance of a just, fair and reasonable procedure. So, by hanging a person in the public, we are violating a just, fair and a reasonable procedure. So, in our country, it is not possible to hang a person in the public. Extrajudicial killings or fake encounters. Recently, we heard news about the Priyanka case in Hyderabad. The 4 suspects were killed in a police encounter, and this was hailed as a huge victory by the media, society, people, everyone. Is it a just trial? Is it a fair punishment which was awarded to them? The police said that these people were shot at because they tried to escape. However, there might be cases where this is not true. It might be an intentional encounter also. So, in those cases, are the police subject to punishment? So, in this case of Prakash Kadam versus Ramprasad Vishwanath Gupta, the Supreme Court inferred that where a fake encounter is proved against a police in a trial, then they must be given death sentence, treating it as the rarest of the rare case. So, in case where it is proved that the police has done the encounter on purpose, that is, it is proved by a trial, that is, Supreme Court, it said that where a fake encounter is proved against a policeman in a trial, they must be given death sentence, treating it as the rarest of the rare case. Human rights and death penalty. The Amnesty International holds that the death penalty breaches human rights, in particular the right to life and the right to live free from torture, cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment of punishment. Both the rights are protected under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which have been adopted by the UN in 1948. So, according to Amnesty International, it says that death penalty must be restricted to the most serious crimes where the crime has been intentional, that is, a person is killing another person with a certain intention. Only to such cases the death penalty must be imposed. And it also says that the death penalty is a culture of violence and it is not a solution for it. So, like this, we have both pros and cons for capital punishment. We can go on debating about both the pros and cons. However, if we have to establish a fair state where people are protected against such heinous crimes, capital punishment is inevitable. Thank you.